It may seem silly and petty, but I'm still mad about the review scores that Digimon World received from critics when it was finally released in the US and Europe. I remember telling my older colleague about the game. In response, he showed me a review of it in a gaming magazine. It was short and rather scathing, ending with a score of 3. He told me that he didn't even want to look at the disc, and that we should play something else. Years later I was able to read that review again, thanks to the magic of archivization. In the review from PSX Extreme's issue 37, dated September 2000, reviewer tells briefly about the game's VPET origins, about the given objective and how one achieves it by, and I quote,
"going to the forest and beating all the little shits."
How battling has no strategic input whatsoever, how basic the training and care aspects are, how the graphics is ugly, and how the game's music consists of construction noises. The review ends with following words.
"It's a big turn-off, especially right at the beginning, when our adventures consist of walking around and beating monsters by pressing a single button. And while Digiworld is extensive, the player won't see much of it, because he will quickly put the game back on the shelf."
Final score
3.
with the screenshots of Agumon chilling in initial locations. While I can agree that the first contact with this game is pretty rough, and that early game combat is very passive, it all gets progressively better. The same can be said about the care and training. There is a lot of depth, which I have already shown to you in this presentation, while Digimon World's graphics aren't anything spectacular. I think the character models are charming and represent the original designs nicely, while some backgrounds are the purest of pure PS1 art. The audio, yeah, Digimon sounds can get pretty grating, and drill tunnel ambience is something else. But what about the boss theme? Amid a forest. Factorial Town. Misty Trees. Ice Sanctuary. The list is long. If these tracks were crap, there would be no remixes or covers. Even bearing in mind that final line about how big the digital world is, I really don't think that the reviewer has played much outside of native forest and drill tunnel. There is simply nothing in this review to prove otherwise to me. Not even a single whiny mention of Digimon dying and having to start all over again. And this lack of time spent on playing Digimon World by the person reviewing it will be something of a recurring theme. The official US PlayStation magazine obviously mentions Pokemon at the start of its review. The reviewer actually praises the graphics, but then bashes the gameplay for being simplistic. By that, of course, meaning the one-command battles, which takes up about a third of the review. The criticism that the game lacks a story is somewhat valid, but at the same time, not really. At least they reached the Grey Lord's mansion and got a Sukamon. But giving Digimon World the same score as Disney's Dinosaur Really? PSM states that the graphics are underwhelming, calls the gameplay simplistic and the sound atrocious. It critiques the storyline for bearing no resemblance to Digimon Adventure, clearly not knowing that both the game and the animated series, although based on the same thing, the VPET, were created independently of each other, and that the game was made first. That PSM review also made me realize that releasing the game after the show aired was a really bad idea, because it built expectations that couldn't be met. The official UK PlayStation magazine review is our first positive review. It is also longer than previous reviews, thus describing the game in more detail. The paragraph about battling states that there is little involvement in it, but it also points out that as your Digimon grows, more options unlock. There is some praise to the graphics and a statement that while the game is repetitious, it is also oddly charming and enjoyable. Unfortunately, all screenshots were taken in the starting locations and only feature Agumon. But hey, in the ending statement, the death and rebirth mechanic is mentioned, kind of. This was a slightly more in-depth review than those we've experienced before, but I still have a strong feeling that Mr. Jonathan Davis only played Digimon World for a few hours before writing his review. The official Australian PlayStation magazine is an interesting case as it's just a trimmed down version of the one from the pen of Jonathan Davis. Even screenshots and this art of Elecmon are taken straight from the UK version. What's interesting is that the Polish magazine, and from what I've seen, the Czech one too, also used the translated reviews from the UK version. To be honest, the official Polish PlayStation magazine used a lot of assets from its British big brother, such as covers and, well, the whole design. It probably used Jonathan Davis' review too. I don't blame them. The UK magazine rocked. GameSpot and IGN reviews are really superficial, only touching the basic elements of gameplay, bashing the passive nature of combat, praising the cutesy graphics and sounds. It reads more like a preview, but seems fair, I guess. I would like them to be more detailed, as it really seems like both reviewers played for 3 hours and then just clocked out. Finally, I have 2 reviews from other Polish magazines, one that I'm particularly fond of. Both are quite funny because they use artwork from Digimon Adventure, which is kind of a cute mistake. Click insists that Digimon are very similar to Pokemon and were made to directly compete with them, which I doubt, seeing how different the two games are. Otherwise, it's quite standard with the basic mechanic explanation, fighting mechanics bashing, and criticizing the graphics and wonky translation. The reviewer points out that it took over 2 years for the game to be released in Europe, which explains why the game doesn't feel fresh from the technical point of view. What angers me is this finishing line where the reviewer once more compares Digimon to Pokemon and then blames Digimon World for failing to be Pokemon, when the game was never meant to be that. Also, hey, they used screens from the official adverts. Nice! Then we have Play. Oh man, I would like to thank, again, MotorBreath87 for scanning and uploading these magazines. It was a nice trip to better times. Play was the magazine with Pokemon walkthrough that I read to sleep. in the later issues. It had a 2-page preview and then a review of Digimon World, which I read after my dad brought me the game. I didn't agree with the score they gave it at the time, but otherwise the review is solid. Here he is! Numemon! I'm so glad that Numemon finally showed up. The reviewer even warns would-be players about how neglect leads to a transformation to a useless, shit-eating monster. It's perhaps the most descriptive Digimon World review of any magazine. At the beginning, the reviewer even states that both Digimon and Pokemon are good and very different from each other, while in his finishing words, after noting the really late European release, he writes that if it wasn't for the existence of Pokemon, Digimon World would be in a class of its own.
Digimon World has as many pros as it has cons, and won't be as acclaimed as Pokemon.
Rough, but understandable. I still don't think that the author played the game for more than 10 hours though, but that review was okay. Honestly, I don't blame the reviewers for only playing a game for a few hours, writing a review, and forgetting about it. Reviewers get paid for the amount of text, not for the time spent playing video games. It only makes sense to write a generic review that includes the basic observations of audio and video design and a summary of the game's mechanics. Use the materials from the press packs to help yourself. Finally, send the review to the editor, cash in a quick buck, and then hop into another game to earn enough money to endure yet another month. I really understand the hustle. When I was a kid and I was writing reviews for my crappy video game site, I played games for a few hours too. Then I wrote a short, vague review that didn't bring anything interesting to the table. I downloaded some screenshots from the internet and slapped a numeric score at the end. I was like 13 years old though. Also, it's not that I'm salty that reviewers have given Digimon World bad scores. No, these reviews pointed the actual faults of the game, more or less. What annoys me so much is that the game actually gets better and more complex. You just have to give it a little time. So, searching for a review from someone who has played the game at least to the finish line, I went to the little site called GameFAQs. I have read most of the Digimon World reviews that have been posted there, both positive and negative. The first thing I have to say is that people on the internet are passionate, that's for sure. There was definitely a lot more emotional writing than in most professional reviews, which can be just as bad as good. I'll start with the positive reviews because there's not much to say about them. Positive reviews with a perfect or near perfect score were clearly written by fans, and while they point out the game's flaws, they sweep it under the rug moments later and finish the review with a 9 or 10, clearly smitten with the game. And I understand that. I love Digimon World with every cell in my body, but this game is not flawless. Not even close to that. I really liked the review by Kyori Kasagami. My only gripe was them saying that it's a one and done game, but I salute you for completing the game 100% in 2002. That's impressive. Negative reviews were more fun to read. They always are. After all, we as a species are fascinated by the negativity. Just look at Some of the perceived flaws and personal beefs amused me a lot, not because they are not valid, reviews are subjective after all. Other than the obligatory, long uninvolved battles, annoying sounds, bad graphics, forgettable story, we have such gems as just one FMV, which isn't really correct. We have an intro, one cinematic at the start of the game, an FMV after the credits, well, if you count that, and a really short one with Mamemon before you continue the game for the first time after seeing the ending. Annoying minigames, such as, and I quote, "Bowls, a European-based sport which is tricky to win." I think the reviewer meant curling, which is similar to bowls and is a European sport. It's not like the show, that was good, while the game is bad. Your Digimon can't digivolve into Mega form. Megas were present in the anime and in Pendulum V-Pets, but the game itself was conceptualized before Megas were a thing, and is an adaptation of the first V-Pet series. Taking your main character's pet to a toilet. Not even Shenmue had this gross element. And to be honest, there weren't any super low scores, with the worst being a 4. Everyone found at least one aspect good. What surprised me the most was that some players called the graphics amazing, while others bashed it relentlessly. So, I decided to ask someone I trust about it.
Some rabbis say yes, some rabbis say no.
Nearly every aspect of the game seemed divisive, and I completely agree with that. My favorite reviews came from Zulak13, who gave it a 5, and that's not because the game is mediocre, but because it's not for everyone, and one by Ravenous Guy, who gave it a 7. That being said, every review was valid, and I'm glad everyone posted their thoughts about the game. It would also be a great time to take a few minutes to talk about how the game was advertised. I only found 2 TV commercials. Japanese, which is super hype and uses the final boss theme.
冒険が熱い、育成が熱い、バトルが熱い。プレイステーションで最強のデジモンを育てろ。育成 RPG デジモンワールド。映画も熱いぜ。
And American, which is much weirder, unusual and vague.
You run away again, buddy, and you're totally grounded.
80 renegade Digimon. They run away, and you have to get them back. The Digimon World video game, rated T, new from Bandai.
Memorable for sure. The print ads in the press were, well, they weren't entirely wrong. It is a tricky game, but why the aggression? And bragging that some Digimon were banned from TV? Was it to scare away potential players? Who wrote this? I know that the main appeal of the Digimon V-Pet were the impossibly cool monsters that contrasted with the cute Tamagotchis, and that the edge was all the rage at the time. But this whole marketing direction seems like a critical miss to me, which saddens me greatly because they chose a great picture and some pretty alright screenshots. Even if, well, just look at this screenshot, which was definitely a part of the press package, as it was in every published preview. This screenshot puzzles me to this day. What is this Digimon struck by Greymon's Red Inferno? After zooming in, It looks like Monzaemon, but Monzaemon's specialties are air and battle. The only Digimon with these 3 particular specialties is Digitamamon, but the Digimon from screenshot doesn't look like it. And why there's a battle with Greymon in the area where Meteormon resides? Maybe it's from an earlier version of the game, or was made strictly for the promotional materials. So, I did some additional digging and have found a screenshot in better resolution. I'm now 100% sure that it's Monzaemon. Well, the mystery itself was much better than the answer to it. My disappointment was immeasurable, and my day was ruined. There is a second version of this ad, much tamer and, in my opinion, better reflecting the spirit of the game. Still a bit edgy, but without the overt aggression. The only weird thing about it, apart from the screenshot with the mystery Digimon, is the line about 80 new friends.
80 renegade Digimon! They run away and you have to get them back! 80 renegade Digimon! 80!
There are 61 kinds of Digimon that you can raise, with an additional 3 that can't be accessed without a cheating device, 2 that were planned but weren't programmed. Including NPC characters, there are about 120 Digimon. So what's the deal with that number?
21, 17.
The next ad, which was published in the UK Digimon comic book, continues with questionable numbers, as it promises over 200 Digimons to train, which is obviously wrong. Digimon World 2 promotional materials often quoted a figure of 200 trainable Digimon, even if the number is actually 182. And while Digimon World 2 was never released in Europe, previews and even reviews appeared in some magazines. We also have Togemon and Ikakumon building false expectations, as if the cover art wasn't doing enough work. The marketing department really didn't think it through, because in the end it did more harm than good, even if it pushed out at least a few copies on the wave of popularity of the animated series. After all, Tentomon is only in the game as an enemy Digimon, and Gomamon is not in this game at all. Finally, I'll show you this Digimon World 2 ad, very similar to the first one, with an angry Digimon and aggressive comment. The info blurb is really short and straight to the point, clearly aimed at those who played the previous game. The numbers are puzzling yet again. That 200 makes a return. 120 new Digimon is technically correct, as 182 minus 61 is 121. All that talking about reviews, criticizing people for what they wrote decades ago, made me want to write my own review, in style of ones from old school magazines, to summarize my thoughts on the game as a game. After researching how to write a review using a trusted source, I have scribbled my own opinion, which I will now share with you. Now you too can repeat your parents' mistakes. Digimon World for PS1 review by Chodyna. After almost 2 years of waiting, English-speaking PlayStation owners can finally play the game based on Bandai's latest cash cow. Was it worth the wait? The answer, just like the game itself, is more complicated than it seems. The plot is really simple. A young Digimon fanatic is sucked into his Digimon console, which serves as a gateway to the titular Digimon world. The mayor of File City, Digimon, chose him to find former residents of the city, bring them back, and solve the mystery of why this Digimon became feral in the first place. There's a little more to this story, but the plot is still just an excuse for world exploration, monster raising, and battling other creatures. Don't expect deep characters and plot lines from the show. The name may be the same, but this digital world is completely different. As players, we directly control the kid, but there's also a second protagonist, someone who is always by your side, through thick and thin, a brawn to our brains, our Digimon buddy. We name him, feed him, take him to the toilet when he needs to. Yes, you read that right. Plan his training regimen, and in response, he does the heavy lifting by helping with various environmental puzzles, fending out enemies, and earning that sweet cash. The gameplay consists mainly of traversing colorful locales, collecting items that help in raising player's Digimon friend, interacting, mainly by fighting, with other creatures, and training. Lots of training. Getting stronger in this game is more about planning and time resource management than defeating opponents in random battles like in a typical RPG. Next to File City, there is a training area with 6 different stations, each of which raises a certain parameter. The player's job is to prepare a training plan, trying not to overwork the poor creature to death and keeping it from taking a dump on the floor. You may ask, dear reader, what's stopping me from sitting in the gym, maximizing my stats and then steamrolling the game? To which I answer, you would run out of food rather quickly, as Digimon, true to their virtual pet roots, are needy creatures. Each Digimon has a limited time in this cruel world, and dies after about 15 days. Your partner will be reborn as a different Digimon, but you'll have to raise him again from scratch. The game is all about finding that perfect balance between exploration and training in preparation for the more difficult areas later on. The inevitability of death and the necessity of having to train all over again, while interesting, will be a very divisive aspect of the game among the players. Your new Digimon will be very weak and fragile, so you will need to raise him to fighting fit by training, which is a very repetitive process. Then you will be finally able to explore for a few in-game days, and then he'll die again. Rinse, repeat. Sounds like insanity and a waste of time, but for whatever reason, I really enjoyed it. Each rebirth is an opportunity to get an entirely different Digimon from a pool of 61 Digimon divided into 5 life stages. You keep your items, and by recruiting new Digimon, you expand initially empty File City with new facilities. Different shops, restaurant, clinic, arena. But the most important thing you get to keep is the knowledge you, as the player, gain by playing the game. This is another of many problem with the game. It doesn't really tell you about most of its mechanics, and the game is deceptively complex. It's really easy to get stuck. Players, especially children, will have a really tough time learning the game, which can certainly result in frustration and eventual abandonment of the game, which would be a real tragedy, as this game is really something else. The digital world is a vast and varied place, presented with beautiful, if a bit grainy, pre-rendered backgrounds. The player will eventually reach a jungle, haunted mansion, prehistoric forest, savanna, canyon, frozen lands, and more, each with its own aesthetic and musical themes. Most areas have one for the daytime and one for the nighttime. Sometimes there's more for little sub-areas. The music for the most part is really good and memorable. I just wish that there were fewer ambient tracks, even if they fit their designated areas. Though I believe no one would miss the drill tunnel track, which consists strictly of heavy machinery sounds, exploring new places, finding Digimon that can be brought back to the city, or simply searching for interesting things is extremely engaging. The world itself is cleverly designed and feels alive. Big props to the designers for incorporating various computer parts and electronics into the scenery. Catching these little Easter eggs was really fun. There is a third gameplay style in Digimon World: Digimon battles. Running into another Digimon 99% of the time initiates a fight in which the player has to command his or her partner in order to succeed and survive. There is no direct control in combat. Partner Digimon is his own being, after all, and so all the player can do is give out more or less precise orders, use battle items, or issue a finishing attack when it charges enough. Early fights are unengaging as the player simply doesn't have any tools to influence the tides of the battle, besides occasionally tossing a healing item. But as I unlocked new battle techniques and got new commands through raising my Digimon's intelligence, combat truly evolved. By strategic and timely usage of commands, I could defeat opponents with much higher parameters than I should be able to take on. It really gets good, I swear. Also, it would be a sin to not mention how good Digimon designs are. Digimon can be cute, cool, badass, terrifying, or straight out weird and disgusting. But there was not a single one that I could honestly call boring. Each of them uses different techniques, has unique animations, and makes different sounds. Making my Digimon transform into a form that I've never seen before was a reward by itself. Just like Tamagotchi, Digimon progresses into new evolutionary stages depending on how well the player takes care of him, messing up resulting in something really unpleasant and weak. Just like in real life, most recruitable Digimon join the city after being bested in battle. But there are pleasant exceptions to this rule, like playing hide and seek, winning a game of curling, or working as a shopkeeper. As maddening as it was something different, alright? There are also fun mini-plots like trying to disband a local bandit gang, fixing a factory, or rescuing a Digimon kidnapped by an evil bear. This game gets really wacky at times. From start to finish, there's always something interesting waiting for you. For completionists, there are medals to collect. Little proofs of astounding feats like raising every Digimon or having one with every parameter maxed out. For those thinking that they are master trainers, there's the arena where your Digimon can fight in teamed tournaments against powerful opponents. Winning every cup is the ultimate challenge of the game. There's also a fishing minigame because why not? Sadly, both the localization and writing leave a lot to be desired. Loading times are also very painful. But the biggest potential turnoff of Digimon World is the fact that the beginnings are really slow and it demands a lot before it opens up and actually gets good. It's a hard, complex game that doesn't hold your hand at any moment. Even if it's unique and different from anything I've played before, I definitely can see why someone would absolutely hate this game. I'll end this review with a plea. Give this game a chance if you like RPGs or you want to play something truly unusual. The sense of discovery I felt while going on silly little adventures in this game can't be described with words. While technically there are a lot of shortcomings, everything just oozes with personality and creativity. This game feels like a passion project. It's clear that the developers put a lot of heart into it. It's a great shame that we've received it so late, as it probably won't impress anyone, especially with PS2 right around the corner. Digimon World isn't going to be a smash hit, but I'm pretty sure it will attract a following in the future. While I can't give it a perfect score because it's a clearly flawed game that isn't for everyone, I still can recommend it wholeheartedly. I already played it a lot and I still want more. There is so much content that I will be occupied for a while. I hope that the sequel, already released in Japan, will come to the West and that it's as good as the original. Final score 7+. And a crooked thumb of recommendation. Pros:
So much to do, so much to see.
originality, charm. Cons: obscure, demanding. It takes a while for it to get good. Technical blunders, definitely not for everyone. That was Chodyna. Take care of yourself. This section is probably much longer than it should be already, so let me get to the point. What is the point of review? To make sure that the subject is worth of someone's time. Review is extremely subjective form of evaluation, affected by authors' biases, preferences and external factors at the moment of writing the review. By the look of it, most of Digimon World's reviews were based on the early impressions of the game, with reviewers clocking out early game, seeing it as a weird game for children. To a degree I can understand that, as Digimon World is a game that is quite likely to make a terrible first impression. The saying that the first impression is the most important one is true. Our brains categorize things we encounter, sorting them as either wanted or unwanted, based on individual preferences and past experiences. It's a cognition mechanism made to help us make quick decisions to prevent us from wasting precious resources, such as time, money, or energy. But the truth is often much more complicated. To understand something, we need knowledge and experience. It takes time and will to be able to rightfully accept something or reject it. Someone may say, "How do you know that eating shit is bad for you?" In cases like this, we have information and some context. We don't really need to try ourselves to know the truth. Let's not forget that apart from negative bias, there's also positive one, where a subject will be idolized and its shortcomings will be promptly omitted. As I said before, building a proper opinion is a hard process that takes both time and will. Digimon World isn't perfect. To be honest, it's as far from perfection as it can be, both technically and gameplay wise. And And yet, in that imperfection, it still remains my favorite game. It took me quite a bit of time to realize that I idolized the game in my head and refused to acknowledge its flaws. It's okay to love something despite its flaws and to point those flaws instead of ignoring them. Mindless adoration is actually one of the biggest disservices that one can give to another, as it denies the chance for betterment. If someone would ask me to write a review of Digimon World about 10 years ago, I would probably score it at 10, seeing that it was, and still is, my favorite game. But it isn't a 10. It's a really niche game, and niche game can't be a 10. Let's face it.